Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Just Politics. This is our first and pilot episode, and I'm so pleased I've got a whole bunch of friends to talk to tonight as we think about some of the big issues in the general election campaign in the UK and some of the more international stories that might have impact on UK politics. Let me introduce you to my esteemed colleagues who are going to be joining me. First up, this is Anya Sizer. Greetings to you, Anya.
Good evening. I found the mute button. Marvellous. Yeah, good evening. Lovely to be here.
Brilliant, Anya. You are the democracy lead at Compassion in Politics. Firstly, tell us a little bit about Compassion in Politics. Who are you? What do you do? I'm a big fan, but some of our watchers won't know yet about you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're a think tank, which is always an interesting phrase. So we are there to sort of be non-party political, but to help shape the political landscape, democracy, to input ideas. All wings of politics have think tanks and people that feed into party politics and political thinking. And Compassion in Politics, I always think we have a head start in that it's very obvious what we do. But we're really values-based. We're there to endorse personality and values and compassionate response. So not just in an individualistic sense, but in terms of wider society, looking at what does it mean to be compassionate and how can compassionate politics work for the good of everyone.
Fantastic. And I heard your director, Jennifer Nadal, on Radio 4 recently interviewing politicians from across the different political parties and talking about mental health. And I found that really helpful because often, particularly in the kind of cut and thrust of an election campaign, we forget the humanity of our politicians. So I thought this was a really helpful, I suppose, humanizing of our political opponents and friends.
It was a really good piece. I definitely recommend people listening to it. It's very sobering because it talks about the extreme ends of what many politicians these days in national and local politics actually are facing. And there was nothing in it that I found surprising, sadly, as someone that's been involved with politics for many years. But it's still incredibly sad and depressing, but it galvanizes me and it galvanizes us at Compassion in Politics to think there has to be a better way. Politics shouldn't be at the expense of the individual. You know, it shouldn't be that people are burning themselves out, that they are facing online abuse. There's got to be another way of doing politics, and not just for the individual, but actually, again, for wider society, because we want people who are best equipped, mentally healthy and able to deal with other people's issues. That's what we are there to do. You know, politicians are there to serve, and you can only really serve to the best of your ability when you are mentally well. So I thought Jennifer's piece was really, really helpful, and there's a lot of people in this sector doing some really positive stuff, but we have such a long way to go with this.
Brilliant, Anya. I'm really grateful for the work of Compassion in Politics. We've known each other a very long time, partly because we're both passionate about adoption. And interestingly, it's not something that's come up yet in any of the parties' election priorities, but maybe there'll be more later down the track.
Oh, gosh, I hope so. Krish, one of the things that you've always said, I know it's an often used quote, but it's a measure of society, isn't it? How we deal with society's most vulnerable and most needy. And certainly those who are adopted and adoptive families are some of the most needy people out there, most people in need of support and equipping and help and our love and concern. And it is so important that the parties get on board with adoption, fostering, kinship, special guardianship, because they are the people that we need to be supporting. So we will keep campaigning on that, you and I, Krish.
Come on, Anya. Fantastic. Let me introduce you to our next guest. This is George. George, welcome to you. Somewhere in Hammersmith. Looks like you're in the Doctor Who set today. Tell us where you are.
I am in Hammersmith, just by the Broadway. If anyone knows Hammersmith and the river, I'm in a co-working space. So I am in a soundproof booth. Hence all of the yellow and the funny bits behind me. But it's an absolute delight, highlight of my day, and dare I say week, to be with you all. No more important discussion.
Oh, fantastic. George, you help out with a whole bunch of different things, but today the hat you've got on is around the GivenX campaign. I was delighted to work with that campaign a little bit for National Voter Registration Day. But tell us, what is GivenX and what are some of your hopes?
Right. Well. GivenX is the campaign, the leading campaign, youth-led campaign to get the 4.2 million people that are not registered to vote or not on the electoral roll registered to vote ahead of the general election. So the breaking news is that National Voter Registration Day is back. It's back on the 18th of June this year, and we are working a lot with corporates, in alliance across the youth sector and business and influencers to make it clear that everybody who is eligible should vote. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what party they're voting for, but the fact that they recognise and have trust in the system and have the backing of wider society to have their say is the most important thing. We are the name speaks for itself. Talk about what you give an X about. If you give an X about climate breakdown, about the rights of refugees and asylum seekers, people with disabilities, whatever motivates your vote, politicians and compassionate people need to realise that as representatives, we all have a collective duty to make sure that we're strengthening our democracy and strengthening our society, to recognise those that very often don't get heard and are having the hardest time, as well as, if I may say so, are actually coming up with a lot of the solutions in their day-to-day lives, and that's young people. So that's what GivenX stands for. And yeah, stay tuned, because we're ramping up again for the 18th of June and beyond, given the election.
Fantastic, George. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about some of the issues that are particularly pertinent for young people. There's a few of them even this week have come to the fore. But talking of young people, let me bring our final guest into the room. I've a vested interest. This is my nephew, Jaeyen Lian. Jaeyen, currently studying at that other university. I can't remember what it's called. Oxford, no. What is it? Cambridge. Lovely to see you. Tell our audience what you're studying and how your interest in politics began.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jaeyen. I'm studying law at Trinity Hall, Cambridge. Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been quite interested in politics. The news has always been on, and I think it's really important for me as a young person and for everyone, all the young people, to have an interest in politics and have an interest in the system and the world that they are ultimately going to go into and going to shape with the work that they do and the impact that they have on people. And so I think, especially with what's happening with the sort of manifestos that are being created that have a lot of impact on younger people, I think it's really, really important that us as younger people get to have our say and get involved in politics, because at the end of the day, it's going to be us running the country in however many years anyway. So
well said. And I'm glad you could join us. It would seem futile to have a conversation about young people and politics without a young person, so we're grateful. They used to say that all the politicians came from Oxford and all the comedians came from Cambridge, but recently things have been reversed. How do you feel about that as a description?
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you see the current state of the footlights at Cambridge, it's not looking good. So, so maybe we won't be having comedians for a while. But it's good to see that politicians are coming from Cambridge. But I think politicians should come not just from Oxford and Cambridge, obviously, but from all walks of life, all sort of universities, places. And I know even university as a whole thing, it requires some certain level of financial stability and that sort of thing as well. And
that's right,
be accessible to everyone and not just
That's going to come up in a minute. So well said. I'm going to try something a little bit scary and hopefully it will work. I'm going to bring all of my guests off screen for a minute and then invite you that are watching to have a go at joining our conversation. So we have something called Mentimeter, which I'm going to employ now. And that allows anyone that's watching that's got access to a mobile phone to join our conversation. So you just put your phone up to the screen and hopefully you can join using our QR code. Let's see if anyone's up for that. If you're watching it on a phone, it becomes very complicated. So this may not work. I'll give you a little moment to get on board and see if you can get on. If you can get on, give us a thumbs up. That lets us know you're in the room. If this doesn't work, it will quickly be edited out of the recording. But see if you can get onto this platform. Let me just check if you can see that. Is it on the screen? It is on the screen. Let's see. Can anyone get on? Oh, yeah, there's a few people joining. That's good. Who else can get in there? Come on, a few more, and then I'll do a bit of audience interaction. We'll find out some of the issues that are important to you. Let's see if I can make it work. Oh, there you go. Thank you for the thumbs up. Keep going. I did this as part of a sixth form Give an X campaign that we did. And we had, I think we probably had 1,000 teenagers on the platform all at the same time. So it was really nice seeing all the thumbs up, but maybe you're watching on a phone, so it's harder for you to participate this way. Okay, well, let's see if it will work. If it doesn't work, then no worries. I'm always up for experimenting with new technologies. Let's see who's in the audience and where you are. Can you tell us? Not that one. Oh no, here we go. Let's go back here. How about this one? How do you feel about politics at the moment? Give us your perspective. What words might you use to describe politics at the moment? This is risky, right? Because you could write anything and I don't know who you are. So let's see how we go. Did it work? Maybe you're typing slower than I think. All right, I'll tell you what, I'll leave that up and then I'll come back to it and see if anyone's able to get onto it. All right, have a go here. Right, okay, Anya, let's talk a little bit more about your compassion in politics. You've got a really interesting couple of initiatives at the moment. The first is an anti-lying piece of work that I think originates in Wales.
Yeah.
That's an interesting moment for us to be talking about lying. Some of us woke up this morning to the news that former President Donald Trump has been found guilty of 34 felonies. This is a kind of bit of a world first, definitely a first in American politics. First time a president or a former president has been convicted of a crime. And he has not taken it well. He's challenged the entire judicial system. And a lot of Donald Trump's base don't seem to be negatively impacted by this news. In fact, even people from the faith communities, I'm a person of faith, my Christian faith informs my whole life, including my politics. A lot of my family, I guess, Christian family in America are backing Donald Trump. He seems to be a little bit like the Black Panther. He had a special suit, and it doesn't matter if you fire bullets at him or you punch him, he just seems to get stronger and stronger. So if a politician like Donald Trump can get stronger, even though he's been found guilty of a criminal crime, why do you guys want to institute legislation around lying and honesty from our politicians? Why is this important to you when it doesn't seem to have any impact on political saliency in the States?
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to feel quite disillusioned and quite depressed about the state of politics. I'll be really interested to see what the words are that come up on the screen around it. Whenever I've mentioned to anyone that, you know, we've been involved with an amendment to a bill in the Senate around lying, the response is nearly always cynicism at the moment. But for me, again, that means that we have to shout louder. Those of us who believe that this is important, we need to shout collectively, and we need to shout louder that this matters. Because if we just all go down the assumption that actually it doesn't matter, we're post-truth, it's about feelings, and, he's just a great guy, so it doesn't matter if actually he's telling the truth or not. If we don't challenge that through things like this amendment, through things like compassion in politics, and all the work that I see happening from many organisations, then we just will go down without thinking, go down blindly this avenue. And we have to pause. We're at a really pivotal moment. Not going down a party political route at the moment, because actually a lot of the political leaders in this country are talking about this being a watershed election. But Starmer the other day did talk about the fact that we have to see this as a really key election in terms of values and in terms of, democracy and a bit of a reset for politics. And the bill in Wales is part of that whole procedure. So it's an amendment to a bigger bill, and it's the first of its kind in the world that would say that there are consequences to lying in public. And the consequences would be that the person can be reported and then will have to potentially lose their seat. There will be consequences to their actions, whereas before, actually, you could lie. People knew you were lying, but there wasn't any follow-up. We're saying that there has to be a stop to that. There has to be this watershed moment of saying, actually, there can be another way. Yes. So let's see how it goes. But I've been encouraged by the increase in cross-party support for that now.
Great.
The media response, and actually a lot of the public response now is starting to say this time has come. Enough now. We don't just have to go down a route of Donald Trump's. We can just pause, restock, and then think.
It seems crazy that we would need something like this. You'd have thought it would have been in place, being the oldest parliament in the world. Why wouldn't we already have this in place? Why has it not been there before, Anya?
I think because we're not challenging it. We're going down this route of, that's just the way it is. This is how politics is done. Let's not challenge it. But actually, why? There's so many structural problems with how Westminster, for example, runs. So many, and we really don't have time for that tonight. But there's so many, and the problem is it then puts off good people from standing. It creates barriers. It creates blockages in the path, so that actually good people, normal people, maybe who've worked a lot of their life, come from minority groups, or just a diverse background, it puts those people off. And so you're left with a smaller elite that can work their way through the system. But actually, we don't want that. The system needs to change so that a better group, a wider group, a more diverse and representative group can get into Parliament.
That's good. I mean, let's have a look at some of the words: demoralised, complicated, challenged. A lot of negative words there. If you want to join in, feel free. Just use the QR code, and you'll be in the room, and you can add your voice to this conversation if you would like to. I mean, it's interesting.
I'm not surprised by any of those at all. But all I would say to people with those feelings, words, is, okay, what's the solution? What can we do collectively to challenge those feelings? They're really understandable. Probably the majority of us have that at times. But actually, if we can take this as a moment for change and all get on board, join up Compassion in Politics, send the civility pledge that we've been working on with Jo Cox, send that to prospective candidates. Let's start to snowball the change. We don't have to accept those words.
Well, come on to the civility pledge, because I love the sound of it. The idea of the credibility of our politicians is really up for grabs. I've seen both the kind of main party leaders have to face this. So, for example, Keir Starmer was questioned about the fact that he made some promises early in his Labour leadership that he's had to, roll back from. And just this week, Rishi Sunak was asked in a Q&A, my mother died during lockdown. She died alone, wasn't able to visit her. But in your workplace, you weren't Prime Minister, but you were Chancellor. Parties were going on. So and the question was asked, how can we ever trust you? So this trust in our political leaders, it isn't helped by Donald Trump and what's happening in the States. And equally, I guess those that are Donald Trump supporters would say that we don't trust the judiciary, we don't trust the law system anymore. We think this is a politically motivated trial. I don't believe that, but that's part of that discourse. So once you lose trust in government and the systems around you, it's quite a dangerous place for society to be, isn't it? Tell us about your civility pledge and how you think it might be able to help us.
I think it's absolutely vital because character matters in our politicians, in our elected representatives. Character's not an add-on, it's everything. It's what drives our actions. And so if we want better actions from our elected representatives, we need to first look at character. And so the civility pledge is a really simple, in some ways, it's only 3 different things that people are signing up to, 3 pledges in the overall pledge that people are signing up to. But it's about character. It's about how we converse with other people, and it's about respect. It's about being civil. It's about honesty, and it's about compassion, that word again, which is a very proactive, dynamic word. So the civility pledge on the surface may look quite simple, but actually what I think it does is it really sets the foundation for this reset that we're talking about. It really talks about, if we can get the character right of those people that are there to serve us, you will get better public trust, and you will then by default get better trust towards those people as well. So some of the awful abuse that people are facing in Parliament and beyond, some of the awful way that people are being treated on social media, it's fueled by a lack of trust in people's character. But if we can sort of say, let's reset, let's look at people's character, let's say that this is foundational, not an optional extra, that then will have a huge knock-on effect, not just for the individuals, but for wider society again. So the pledge is an amazing way for people to get on board. And again, we're having some really interesting conversations, not just with prospective candidates, but with people like Fabian Women's Network, who are really wanting to support and come on board. I hope other organisations, Christians on the left, have expressed an interest in it. So I think this is going to be a statement of intent about this is how we do politics in a better way. And it starts with character. So I'm really excited about this pledge. It's an honour to work alongside the Jo Cox Foundation, who I've long Jo Cox herself was a woman of such integrity and such character. So I hope we're doing her justice through this pledge as well.
Oh, fantastic. So important. I lived in Albania a long time ago, and there was a crisis that happened in Albania because there was this pyramid scheme. And in a country that had come out of communism and was, if you like, not necessarily financially literate, the idea that if you put, $100 into this special scheme and you were given $200 in a week's time led to a kind of feeding frenzy. Everyone got every bit of money they could put into this scheme. And it was even backed by the Albanian government verbally and visibly on television. And at the key moment when as many of the population put all their life savings in, and this was the poorest country in Europe at the time, the people running the scheme ran away with the money and just robbed the country. And because the government had been involved, it just led to complete civil breakdown. And there were, prisons were liberated, banks were broken into, arms caches were broken into. I was in Albania last week, actually, and people were telling me tanks were stolen. I mean, there was just no trust in any of the systems because they felt so let down. And so I've seen what happens. We experienced it, like machine gun fire all night, when a society loses trust in its leaders, you're not that far away from chaos and anarchy. Interestingly, I was in Albania when Lord Cameron was in Albania, and he was supposed to be there for quite a long visit, but ended up being there for about an hour because he was mysteriously called back to the UK for an important cabinet meeting. And all the civil servants were saying, we think this is it, we think this is it. And sure enough, the election was called. So I really believe in the work that you're doing. And like you say, Jo Cox was an inspirational figure, and it's a great way to honour her memory by calling people to civility. If there are people watching tonight that want to get involved in it, what can the rest of us that aren't politicians do? Is it something we could ask a candidate to sign up to if they come to our door, or at Hustings? Is that the thing you do?
Absolutely, yeah. Please come and have a look on the Jo Cox website. Please come and look at the Compassion in Politics website. There's ways to get involved. Hand it to prospective candidates, ask them what they feel about this. What I would really love to see is people elevating the good people. We focus way too much on someone, you know, who's shouting loudly and a lot of hot air, and there's some huge examples of not great politicians. Let's start elevating people who are signing up to the pledge, who are doing good stuff. There's a lot of good people out there. We just need to shout out about them.
That's brilliant. Brilliant work. If you've just joined us, this is our first Just Politics live event. We're talking about character in politics. We've thought about this civility pledge and this lying legislation that Compassion in Politics are driving through. Please Google them and see how you can support what they're doing. We're now going to talk about young people, and I'm not saying you and I are excluded from this conversation, Anya, but let's start with George and Jaeyen. I'm sure you've got lots to add. But let's bring George onto the stage. George, for those that have just joined, your hat that you have on today is the Give an X campaign, which has been inspiring young people to vote or to register to vote. I mean, there's a lot of fear that young people might find it difficult to vote because they don't have the right ID. Can you help those that are worried about that? What do people actually need in order to be able to vote? Let's say they haven't got a passport or a driving license. Is there a way they can still vote?
There is many ways that you can still vote. You can still apply for an ID card. There's a bespoke ID card that you can apply for just for the elections. That there's also and they were, so when I turned up to the polling booth, I used my blue badge. I'm a wheelchair user with cerebral palsy, and the blue badge was enough, and it had my name, my date of birth on it, and it actually as a piece of ID wasn't actually in date, but they knew it was me, that it had my photo, and there are many different ways in which people can vote, so you've got a number of weeks. You've got until kind of mid June to register for ID. So and it takes seconds.
Brilliant.
So you've got lots of time.
You fared better than our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who managed to turn up to his local election without ID. I think it was under his rule that this voter ID was brought in, so that felt a little bit ironic.
Well, may I say personally, maybe that act demonstrated why there isn't as much trust in politics, because of course it grabbed the headlines, and dare I say, our former Prime Minister may have forgotten his ID card, but there seemed to be a lot of showmanship and a lot of kind of bluster in that act. But the point being, and this is a serious point. you are far more likely not to have ID if you're young. The stats show that. The older generations can use their bus passes and things, but young people can't use a travel card. So as a piece of legislation, there are questions around whether that was implemented equitably, and actually whether it kind of was kind of a piece of legislation that was needed, because actually we've got many different problems, and we should focus on the positives, as Anya so so rightly says. But electoral fraud actually historically isn't. But
right.
the thing for us to say and to take away is that there are many different ways in which you can get ID. You've still got time to get ID. It's simple, and if you've got any questions around how to get ID, anyone can reach out to me. My Life ICL, give an X, and we'll support you to do so. So it shouldn't stop you.
We're grateful for your work, George. And I think you mentioned earlier that 18th of June is National Voter Registration Day Mark II. Now that we've got an election, that gives you enough time to be able to register to vote, get an ID card, and still participate. I'm going to bring Jaeyen into this conversation in a minute as a young person. But from your perspective, what do you think are some of the reasons young people aren't voting? I think, as I last looked at the stats, young people are the least represented group in our democracy. They're the least likely to register to vote. They're the least likely to vote. What are some of the reasons that you're hearing as the Give an X campaign? What's stopping young people engaging?
Well, there's again many different reasons. I would say that there isn't enough citizenship education of any form. I think that we do mischaracterize, if I may say so, what politics actually is. There seems to be a detachment, if I may say so, between the life and the drama of Westminster and the lives that young people are living on the street. A lot of young people are either fearing the end of the week because of the cost of living crisis, or the end of the world because of ecological breakdown. This is a very, very hard time to grow up. It perhaps never has been harder with kind of student debt, etc. So there is a need. There is a need to acknowledge, I think, the complexity of people's lives, actually how resilient young people are in, and how much they're actually already doing to try and spontaneously kind of and creatively create the solutions for kind of for their communities. I am so pleased to lead on the I Will movement, which leads on the Power of Youth Charter. We have 400 signatories and organisations all committed to the power of youth and changing their places and spaces to make it easier for young people to engage in kind of wider society, from UNICEF to the local scout site. That young people are active and young people care. They're just not at this moment in time directing those efforts towards Westminster and our traditional systems, and that may be because we don't, as of yet, have a minister for youth. We don't have neither party. It's not a political point. So neither party has yet actually said what their offer is for young people. Although there was a comparison this weekend, which you alluded to, Krish, around the commitment to votes at 16 from Labour and national service from the idea for national service from the Conservatives. There has been a lot of talk about policies, but no package and no internal kind of structure as to who within our wider system has the remit and will be responsible for in the long term for looking after the welfare of young people.
That's so helpful, George. And I love that phrase. Some are worried about the end of the week. Some are worried about the end of the world. That's beautifully put. Let's bring Jaeyen into this conversation. Jaeyen, just for the viewers that have joined us a little bit later, quick recap. You're at Cambridge University. You're in your first year and you're studying law. What's your take? We have this interesting week to be talking about young people and politics.
Mm-hmm.
As George said, we've got the pledge to national service to come in from the Conservatives, that all 18-year-olds, almost without exemption. And a few questions were raised about people that might be caring, young carers, and everyone would be responsible, although parents wouldn't be imprisoned for not sending their young people in. You've got national service on one side, and I guess on the other side, you've got the pledge for votes for 16-year-olds. Amongst your student friends and kind of the youth culture that you're part of, what are you hearing about this political moment for young people?
It is a really big moment amongst my student friends and people I'm around. I'm lucky enough that people are quite politically involved in these sorts of things. I would add to what George said, and it also links back to your conversation with Anya. One of the reasons that I feel that young people don't seem to be voting is a lack of trust in the system, lack of trust in politicians, and very much trying to be outside that system because they don't see that politics as it stands is a valid method of fixing what we have. And there is a thing of fearing the end of the week and the end of the world, which I also think is really well put. As far as the national service whole debacle, I think it's very interesting that the Conservatives have brought up this policy, especially for 18-year-olds, where the majority of people who are going to be 18 when this comes out aren't actually able to vote at the moment. And I think it's really interesting about that, and also the whole idea about rip-off degrees and how Rishi wants to get rid of those. And I think he's making a lot of policies about young people, which a lot of young people aren't really having an opportunity to do anything about. And I think also with Labour and a lot of other parties, a lot of the policies and conversations that these parties are having surround young people, and especially 18-year-olds, even 16-year-olds, with the Conservatives' plans of reforming the A-level system and just education as a whole. And I think with this massive effect on young people, I think it's really important that young people do vote. And I think it is a good idea that the voting age should be lowered, which is what Labour are planning to do. We've seen that it's worked in Scotland and the other nations within the UK. And I don't think we should be scared of letting younger people vote because they're apathetic or they won't vote in some erratic way, because people who can vote still vote in erratic ways. People who can vote are still
That's true.
The fact that these policies are affecting younger people so much means that they should have a say in the society that they're going to grow up in and they're going to live in.
Yeah, well put.
I think it's very telling that, in my experience at least, I know a lot of 16-year-olds who I would trust to vote, not because of their political alignment, but just because of the way that they think and the way that they've engaged with politics, than a lot of people who are older than 18 and who can vote. And I think it's really important to give those young people a voice, particularly when you're 18 and you are a part of society. And as Keir Starmer said, you can pay taxes, you can serve in the army, you can do all this stuff, and you're not allowed to vote or have a say in the society that you're living in. And I think that's
right.
Should change.
Again, this is not a party political broadcast. You can vote for whoever you like, but a lot of the polling suggests that the Conservative Party are not looking strong amongst young people, and the decision to launch the national service seems an unusual one if you're trying to turn that around. You can't imagine many 18-year-olds wanting to vote for that. And so I think one journalist put it straight to Rishi Sunak. Do you actually like young people? You seem to be focusing a lot of your attention on pensioners, because he's in the same week, National Service, you also get, further commitment to the triple lock on pensions. So that was interesting. When I put on this event for National Voter Registration Day, we were able to poll about 1,000 18-year-olds at the same time. And I asked them, do you think that politicians are listening to you? And 98% said no. But then I asked them, and this was only about 5 weeks ago, have you decided who you're voting for yet? And only 52% had decided who they'd voted for. Now, look, this is not, 1,000's a pretty good sample. It was right across the UK, but it's not, empirically completely robust. But I was intrigued. So it would seem a good time for politicians to lean into young people and actually listen to them and inspire them, whichever side of the house you are, to actually be part of our society. We're asking, if the National Service comes in, we're asking them to take a more active role. Here is a really easy way that we could do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think talking with a lot of people, of my friends, a lot of them have been sort of saying that it seems more that the Conservatives may not be focusing on younger people as much, but rather trying to win back Reform voters. And that seems like the big picture in my eyes and in a lot of other younger people's eyes. Particularly, one of my friends is actually on her gap year and will be in Thailand at the time of the election. And so we've been having a big discussion about potentially the timing of the election is to sort of hinder the young people voting. And add that extra barrier of having to do a register for a postal vote. But yeah, I think it is an interesting discussion to have about whether the Conservatives really are focusing on young people, which what they really should be doing, or just trying to potentially minimize losses at this point.
Interesting. George, I think I heard someone in the Twitter sphere arguing that the National Service policy was a clever way of getting more young people voting. Do you think it will have an impact?
I would say that one way to dampen any innovation and any spark and any art, which I believe the democracy and politics at their best, they're art forms and forms of expression for me, and at their best, they embrace the lived experience. Leonard Cohen wrote a song which I repeat every day, which is the cracks are where the light gets in. And I think to a lot of what Anya said, it kind of resonates in terms of compassion, in terms of demonstrating to your community and to your world kind of what you stand for. To me, that's politics, and that's what we should embrace. And so I think the rationale to try and build stronger communities, to build connection and relationships when young people have never been more lonely and never been more fractured, that makes sense. The thing that doesn't, and to build infrastructure and support infrastructure around that makes sense. What didn't make sense to me is the compulsory element. There is a contradiction in terms, in the term compulsory volunteering, and so there's a misalignment there. It certainly landed. It certainly sparked a conversation from me in terms of, and I'm not a political tactician. What I think it spoke to, though, was a drive to create kind of division intergenerationally, rather than compassion and collaboration across the generations. And I don't know, actually, a mother, father, foster carer that doesn't want the best for their generation. I think, and the generation to follow. So that was interesting to me. It may have sparked more young people to vote. Indeed, I hope it has, and I'm grateful for the conversation starter. I really am. But what we need right now is a coordinated, collaborative, compassionate alliance to say that this is actually the apparatus we need in Westminster to actually make democracy kind of fairer and better for people in the long term, sustainably.
That's really well put, George, and thanks for generosity on that. That there are some good elements to a national service program. We can see that in many countries in the world. This sense of civic pride that you're contributing, and I like the idea of breaking down some of those barriers. But ironically, the timing of it makes some people feel that you're trying to generate more friction between the generations. And it's true that these are dangerous times. Many people are talking about us being closer to the 1930s, pre-war. Some of our military have said that you need society to come together, don't you? You need a sense of solidarity. So I don't know. I love your generosity of spirit towards the programme.
For every £1 invested in youth work, I believe it's £8 that returns back. There are many good ways of doing and achieving what national citizen service, what the national service idea. I think the good bits of it. Look at the statements put out by Ndidi Okase and others from the youth sector. There's other ways of achieving it, perhaps.
Yes, really helpful. Well, friends, it's been fantastic to have you all here. Can I throw a last question to you? I wonder if you can see this image. This was one of the media images of the week. This is Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, on a paddleboard on Lake Windermere. Oh, it's not Lake Windermere, it's just called Windermere, apparently. And Tim Farron is stood somewhere a bit further down stream, looking very stable. And apparently Tim Farron's daughter was also on a paddleboard as well. But the only one that managed to fall in was Ed Davey. Now, I think Ed said that at least one of the times he fell in, it was on purpose. So your quick verdict, is the Liberal Democrat media team winning because it's hard to get noticed as the third party? Or is this undermining that trust that we want to build in politicians? To be fair to the Lib Dems, they did seem to tie a policy ask with the stunt. So this one was about polluted water, and Windermere's had a particularly difficult pollution time. I think he talks about children's mental health when he was going down a water slide with a Sky News presenter. But I know we're not all professional political tacticians, but what's your gut reaction? A good approach, making the best of the limited resources you have, or a cheapening of politics, or somewhere between? Let's start with Anya, then we'll hear from Jaeyen, and then we'll hear from George. What do you think? I'm throwing this at you without prep. What do you think?
Well, I'm grateful. I thought you were going to ask us to do a caption competition, so I feel like we've got off lightly. I am honestly in two minds, because part of me has a real, I guess, guilty pleasure with the Lib Dems, some of their stunts that you're like, oh gosh, what are they going to do now? But I have to say, going back to the wider picture, that it is absolutely a watershed moment of how do we build trust? How do we reach out to people who are feeling disillusioned with politics? I'm not entirely convinced that this is the way forward to do that. I think maybe some really savvy policy ideas, listening to where people are at, understanding what matters to them might cut through slightly better than falling off a paddleboard. But open.
I hear you. I mean, at one level, Anya, everyone's doing it, aren't they? So Rishi Sunak's getting on a train with a £750 backpack apparently, and Angela Rayner's waving the aeroplanes down. So is this just an iteration of that to grab a headline?
I think we can do better. I think we can do better.
I hear you. Jaeyen, what about you? What are students saying about the Lib Dems, if anything?
I mean, we probably can do better, but I do think this is a fun stunt, if nothing else. And I do think it is. I don't think it's a bad thing for politics. I think, as you said, everyone's sort of doing it. and it would be difficult to police something like this. Obviously, the lying legislation would be really good to police individual ministerial responsibility and from a more political standpoint. But this, it is a stunt, and it is, I think, the age-old phrase of any publicity is good publicity. Obviously, that's not true, but I think it is. I think it is not a terrible thing that he's done this, and it has sparked a conversation, which is what politics is ultimately all about, and advertising. And also, it's, I mean, as far as Lib Dems are going, probably not a good conversation for them, because I don't know if you've seen there's a TikTok meme war going on between the Labours and Conservatives. So that's engaging young people, I suppose. But Rishi Sunak mentioned Ed Davey falling off the paddleboard quite negatively in one of his videos. But yeah. I don't think it's a bad thing for politics, and I think it would be. I think it's a decent idea to get a conversation going about your policies, especially when you are the third party. But I do think we probably can do better.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jaeyen. George, last word from you.
This is difficult because if I was Ed Davey, I would have gone in the water, and I would have gone in the water. I think because there was there is a kind of sense of there's a sense of play there. There's a sense of enjoyment. There's a sense of actually I'm in this. I'm committed. I'm going to be in the deep water with you and with my communities. I think actually people like Ed Davey can't really win either way there. Either they have people like us on panels saying it's a stunt and they shouldn't have done it, or they kind of look like bystanders in suits on the sidelines. And so I don't think Ed Davey can win on that. I do wish that these moments didn't feel as if they were kind of slotted into the campaign calendar, because I wish we could actually get away with politics being a little bit more boring, a bit more serious, because to me it is, and actually the people in these positions felt as if they could demonstrate authentically who they are. I actually know people who have been supported by Ed Davey, if I may say so. He does a lot around send reform, a lot around kind of innovations within cancer. He, as a lot of these politicians are, is a good man, and as long as he felt as if he was authentically presenting himself in that moment, I don't think I can criticize.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because it is the system we've created, and we could long for a better system, but we are where we are now, and so I get the need to do it, and I guess I'm sympathetic to it. But if you haven't got much resource, you've got to use what you can. I'm used to that as a charity leader. You just try anything you can. I once went on a tour with a sofa, and I took a sofa up a mountain in order to have a conversation about the difficult things in faith. So I'm sympathetic that way, but I'm also sympathetic with this view that we have so many serious problems that we need a serious government. So that's difficult. I really sense that tension. But thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Some of our viewers, I think we've got about 145 people currently watching an in-depth discussion about the big issues this week. So thank you, George. Thanks for all that you do, inspiring young people to vote and to volunteer. Jaeyen, you're at Cambridge. We're proud of you, and thanks for being a great voice for young people today. And Anya, we're fully backing your Compassion in Politics pledge and the anti-lying legislation. That's fantastic. So join us again. We'll give us another go next week. We won't know what the issues are until later in the week, but you can see we'll bring together a great panel and an opportunity to get behind the headlines, look at some of these issues. And as you can see, we're trying to take a generous approach to politics and trying to think, how do we make our country actually work for the people that need it? You did mention Ed Davey's background. He was a young carer looking after his mother when he was a child. There are a whole bunch of young people that have to do that. I don't know if you saw this week, for example, there was the race around the world, and one of the winners grew up in a kinship care situation, wasn't able to grow up with his mum and dad, and so grew up with another family member. So we are interested in how we make our country work for the people that need it the most. And we're grateful that you're able to join us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks again, everyone. See you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.